Okay, this is going to be part 2 of Paintings of the Saints from this book right here, Best Christian Art by me, Pete Rogers. And we're starting out here. I'll give you the page number if you're following along with your own copy of the text, page 331. So here's St. Jerome. And St. Jerome was famous for translating the first version of the first popular version of the Latin Bible called the Vulgate. St. Jerome is actually a controversial figure. And I'm not going to get into all the Bible doctrine, and I'm not even that big of a fan of all the Bible doctrine. But just to let you know, I've read a bunch of books on Bible commentary, and St. Jerome is considered by many people a very controversial figure. And the reason is there were two major dominant strains of Christianity around the time when he was doing his Bible translation. One was what you would call the heavily Greek influenced one that sort of saw the idea of the afterlife as more of a purgatory-like thing, of a goal of redemption of the people, of almost everyone, almost like a universal restoration thing. Versus there was more of a Latin school that was more almost like a more of a punishment vindictive version of hell. So I really don't care too much about all this dogma, but just to let you know, the Latin version of the Bible, the Vulgate, as translated by St. Jerome, was more of the sort of vindictive, harsher version of hell than had been envisioned earlier by the sort of Greek influenced Christians like Origen. Okay? So anyways, here's a painting of St. Jerome. This one by Domenico Ghirlandaio from 1480. And then here's a painting of one of my favorite saints. This is St. Thomas Aquinas, big time scholar saint. Okay, and he's the one that sort of made Aristotle more acceptable to the church. And he really sort of set the foundation for the Renaissance. Okay, and you know, the school system is called scholasticism. They'll also call it Thomism. So he's Thomas of Aquinas. This was a very good thing. You know, faith and reason go together. I've talked about that in previous lectures. In order to have good science, you have to have the religion, because otherwise it all just goes into whatever generates money. But anyways, Thomas Aquinas was a great man, great saint. And he's the one who set the stage for the Renaissance. Okay. This right here is St. Catherine Alexandria, refuting the philosophers of the Roman Emperor Maxentius. This was painted by Goswin van der Weyden, who was the grandson of Rogier van der Weyden. Rogier van der Weyden was the best painter of the 1400s, him and Botticelli. This one was done in about 1600. So basically, Emperor Maxentius sent philosophers to refute her, and she refuted them and converted them to Christianity. Even the emperor's wife went to talk to St. Catherine, and she converted to Christianity. But Maxentius, wasn't happy about it, and he had her martyred. So that's St. Catherine of Alexandria. But you can see the Christianity has all these role models of, excellent behavior. So that's why I say psychology is a joke. You go to a psychologist, give me role models of good behavior. They can't give you anything. They don't have any moral standards, any strong sense of right or wrong. Whereas the Catholic Church very quickly can tell you, these are the saints. These are the male saints, the female saints. We can show you our good literature. Look at all our authors. Charles Dickens, Christmas Carol, Les Miserables, Victor Hugo, Brothers Karamazov, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Quo Vadis, Henry Sienkiewicz, and it goes on and on. Okay, they can very easily do that. They go, well, what is good art? They go, we'll show you all the paintings in this book. What is good sculpture? The sculptures in this book, the sculpture of Michelangelo, etc., Bernini, etc. So they can answer all these questions. What is the purpose of life? To honor God and love thy neighbor and your family and all that stuff. Honor thy parents, follow the Ten Commandments. They can answer all these questions pretty easily, versus regular psychology can't do that. And their principles are everlasting since, the beginning of it all, versus psychology is going to change, every couple of years. Whatever the establishment tells it to do, it will accept that. Okay, here's St. Catherine of Siena, Italy. And she stayed to help the plague victims in Siena. She wears a crown of thorn to symbolize that she's a bride of Christ. She was a great letter writer. Actually, she's a really smart lady. She wrote a bunch of letters that helped convince the papacy that it should be returned from France, Avignon, to Rome. This painting's by Baldassare Franceschini. Okay, the Italian names are kind of nice, all the vowels and they rhyme and stuff, but it's a nice painting. And you get that sense, one of the things I like about the Christian church, there's a place for everybody, okay? You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be good looking. You don't have to be anything. You just follow Christ, whoever you are. Okay, here's another perfect example of that. This is Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, and she was the daughter of a king, but instead of wanting to live her life like the typical royalty, she decided to. She did get married and have 3 children, and she wasn't a member of some order, I forget which order, but she chose to serve the poor, helping to feed them and all these other things. And Christianity welcomes all these people. You don't have to have anything academic about them at all. My mother, I never saw my mother read a book in my entire life, okay? But she was actually really smart. And I tell you that because that's one of the things I think is great about Christianity. Everybody's welcome and there's a place for everybody, whoever you are, whatever your strengths and weaknesses, it doesn't matter. And that painting was by Edmund Leighton. He's an awesome artist from England in the 1800s. Here's another saint. Saint Margaret of Cortona was a mistress of a wealthy man initially. Later, she decided to stop doing that, and she started a hospital. She became a patron saint of the sick, the homeless, and the falsely accused. This painting by Alessandro Calvi, 1815. Okay, here is a magnificent painting, and this one's called The Apotheosis of St. Ignatius. The painter's name was Andrea Pozzo, and this was a flat ceiling, and look how he painted it. It's a miraculous skill in painting with perspective. It looks like a dome. It's incredible. It's one of the most awesome paintings ever made. You want to talk about great skill in the Baroque. That was made in 1690. Okay, here is St. Ignatius of Loyola, and he's the Spanish guy who he was actually fighting for Spain, and he was injured. He was hit by a cannonball in the leg, and while he was convalescing in the hospital, he was read about, the life of Christ, and he decided to, not be a soldier anymore and to be a follower of Christ. And he started the Jesuits, and he wrote a book about, following in the steps of Christ. And there's a real good movie about him. I don't have the movie cover in front of me, but it's good. It was only made a couple of years ago. I saw it. I really liked it. So I liked him. I admired him. He went around and just did the right thing. And he helped all these poor people and sick people. And the Jesuits were really good. They've been taken over and corrupted, so they're not good anymore. But they used to be real good. And a lot of people went to Jesuit schools and got good educations from that. Okay, here is a painting of St. Dominic, founder of the Dominican order, with his vision of receiving a rosary from the Virgin. This one's also by Bernard Cavallino. And he prayed the rosary. The rosary is a powerful thing. There's a guy, Father Patrick Peyton, the Irish priest. He said the family that prays together stays together. He would have rosary rallies, and there would be millions of people sometimes in the audience, like when he was in the Philippines. Okay, and I'm going to show you a picture of my mom. My mom was like a saint, okay? The best person I ever met in my whole life was my mother. And she was an amazing lady, okay? She wasn't an academic. I never once saw her read a book. She had collections of all statues of all the saints. She was a minister of care. She adopted several different people. Whenever my dad was a psychiatrist, and if they knew the family, because lots of doctors and their families would come to him, and if there was a problem in a family for whatever the reason, my mom would just adopt people in their families until they got their act together. Like, let's say the parents were sick. My mom would let their children live at our house until their parents were ready again to take care of them fully. So it was real routine that my mom was adopting people to live in our house. We had extra bedrooms. My father was pretty wealthy. Doctors got paid like 4 or 5 times as much back in those days as they do now. Other things that were unique about her, like for example, I have a relative, I have an aunt who was an alcoholic. My mom would just bring her to our house and detox her. Okay, she'd ask my dad questions on the phone, but she would just do stuff like that. Whatever my mom thought was right, she would do it. She didn't care about rules. In fact, my mom would always break rules if she thought it was funny. When she was a child growing up, her family was very, very poor. The father was known as being a genius. He's actually known as being the smartest man in all of Puerto Rico, but he was a merchant marine, and he had a family on another island. And when her mother, his wife, found out, my mom's mom, she went apeshit bananas and, started hitting him, and he said, well, screw this, and he never came back. And he didn't support them financially either, so they were destitute. They had another relative who owned a barn, and they just lived on the ground in a barn. So my mom literally grew up in a barn on a dirt floor, okay? And I wasn't joking about him being like the smartest guy in all of Puerto Rico. All the kids were so smart, it's not even funny. My mom graduated with a graduate degree from University of Chicago. A bunch of her brothers and sisters are physicians and have graduate degrees. The oldest boy, unfortunately, he had it the roughest. He had to go work and had some pretty tough jobs in order to supply his younger siblings. My mom worked in a movie theater that she had to make a little bit of money for the family, and her brothers and sisters did as well. But the reason I mention it is she always thought going to the movies was fun, and she would always try to make me lie about my age in line so you get a cheaper fee. And I never would, but she just did it because she thought it was funny to see me say, "No, Mom." She goes, "Say you're 11," when I was 12. "No, Mom, I'm not going to do that." I don't know how to explain it. I know it sounds stupid, but at the time it was quite funny. She was always doing that. She'd say, "You're a chicken. You're a chicken." And the whole thing was just stupid. But the point of it was we were always laughing and cracking up when she was around. There was always some minor drama. And I can tell you on the big stuff, she was on the board of directors at an orphanage. She was a tour guide at Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio Architecture Suite. She was a docent and tour guide. She was at the Art Institute. She was always doing nice stuff and good stuff for people. And just what it was like if I ever went to the tennis club. I didn't really ever go to the tennis club because I considered it a sport for wussies. I was a wrestler. In retrospect, I wish I had played tennis. It would have been a nice sport. You can keep doing that all your life versus wrestling. It's hard to do that after college. But anyways, I would go to the tennis club and they go, "Oh, you're her son? You're Olga's son?" Everybody would want to meet me, go, "Look, here's her son." And they'd all come over to me. "We love your mother. We love your mother." All these people, I can't tell you how many people in my life told me they love my mother. And they go out of their way to say all kinds of nice things to me about my mother. That's how she was. That was the effect she had on people. So anyways, I'm just going to tell you one quick story about her, and that's what this drawing of. One of her grandchildren was born very sick in septic shock, and the mother was also in the intensive care unit on a ventilator. We thought they were both going to die. I was called in to make some medical judgments, and pediatrics is not my field at all. Luckily, I had a friend who's a lawyer who was also a pretty wise, smart person, and we got the baby transferred to a pediatric hospital. They put him on ECMO, endocorporeal membranous oxygen, a heart-lung bypass machine. And the reason I tell you this, at this time, my mom was dying of metastatic cancer. She had widespread lung metastases, coughing up blood every day, and she went to the hospital immediately, put a cot in the room, and she stayed with that baby every second. So here she is dying. She's coughing up blood in the garbage can, and she's hiding it from the nurses so they don't kick her out. And then she's holding the baby. I am with you. You're going to be okay. Which, helps the baby to not be stressed out so that its body can heal. This kid had so many tubes coming out of him, it's not even funny. We all thought the baby was going to die. The baby was in a code blue for hours. We all thought he was going to be brain dead. The kid came out perfectly fine. He graduated from college as an honor student. And so what I'm saying is my mother saved this baby's life. And she helped out with other babies, too. One of the other babies for one of my other siblings was born premature, had some problems. My mom was there. Whenever there was a problem, that's how she was. She always did the right thing. You didn't even have to think about it. She would always do the right thing, whatever the situation. So she was extraordinary. There was nothing like her. Mother's Day, there would be like 100 people in our house. She was like the queen of everything. That's why I kind of laugh at these women who think like, they're doing some job for some corporation that could give 2 cents about them, would fire them in 2 seconds. And I'm like, you don't know how it was with the women back in my day. My mom was like the queen of all of them, but man, they had 1,000 times better than the modern women of our day. I saw it, okay? People honored my mother. They'd kiss her feet. All the people she adopted, the girls that lived at our house for a couple years to get their acts together, they'd kiss my mother's feet. They loved her so much. My mother taught me how a person should behave. I never saw a better person in my life. Okay, like if there was a party and somebody didn't know somebody, she would always get all the people off the wall who were sad and lonely and introduce them to somebody who they could talk to. She was always doing the right thing. Whatever it was, she did the right thing. Okay, St. Francis in Ecstasy. This is just St. Francis of Assisi. And there's a lot of stories about him. He was in some ways a Christ-like figure. At the time of his life, the church was in decay, and he helped to sort of, in a sense, rebuild the church. rebuild the people's faith in the Catholic Church, and he rebuilt monasteries. He did all kinds of good things. He was really an incredible saint. So that's Saint Francis of Assisi, and there's a good movie about him too. I actually should have put the movie in here, and I should have put the movie about the other ones in here too. But be that as it may, we'll end here for today, and hope that was interesting for you.